The average American spends over $2,500 a year at restaurants. In Philadelphia alone, the restaurant industry reported 2007 revenues of $2.3 billion. When it comes to a memorable restaurant experience, restaurant diners do not hesitate to spend money. The dollar price of a restaurant meal is paid for at the end of the night, but most people have no idea just how expensive the social cost of eating out is. Whether we know it or not, we as restaurant diners are intimately connected to restaurant workers. We rely on them to cook our food, serve it in a memorable way, and then clean up after us. However, while we focus on the food presented before us, we pay little attention to the waiters, the cooks, the dishwashers, and all the other restaurant workers who make our meal possible. Who are these people? How are they treated? What are the problems they face? What price do they pay so that we can enjoy our meal?
I grew up an Army brat. I was born in Oklahoma, traveled around the country, lived in Panama for a little while actually also. Parents from Ohio, sort of like a Midwest, hardworking, coal mining attitude.
Bueno, yo soy de México, del centro de México. Bueno, antes que me dedicaba yo a la agricultura, criaba yo becerros y la necesidad de sacar adelante la propia familia que forma uno. Eso nos hace llegar acá con las manos prácticamente vacías.
I don't know, it's a great question. How did I decide that I wanted to go into the culinary arts? I don't know, I think it chose me, not to sound corny, I think it chose me.
I always liked cooking, and working in a kitchen was always something I wanted to do. So it was kind of something I always wanted to do growing up, and just decided one day to act on it. I've worked in all different kinds of restaurants, fast food kind of place, sit down, casual, more upscale, kind of all over the board.
Mi trabajo, primero cuando llegué, trabajé aquí en una factoría, después ingresé al restaurante. Cuando yo me vine, mi hijo tenía aproximadamente un año. Ayer cumplí 5 años de no verlo.
I mean, it's a hard life. It's not an easy line of work necessarily. It's a lot of physical activity, late nights, early mornings, working 6 to 7 days a week for long hours. On average, I've probably worked 50 to 60 hour weeks since I started working in restaurants.
Despite the long hours restaurant workers put into presenting restaurant patrons with a memorable experience, the money that diners expect to go into the pockets of restaurant workers often gets stolen by their employers.
So wage theft really happens in a few different ways. Wage theft generally defined is when an employer is not paying their employee the standard or the statutory wage that they're supposed to get. So that would be at least $7.25 an hour for each hour that the person works, and it would be 1.5 times their normal rate of pay for any hour they work over 40 hours in a week.
Bueno, cuando entré, primero me pagaban las 6, 2 semanas después me pagaban 7. 7 se mantuvo hasta 2 años.
With restaurant workers, we tend to see a lot of just non-payment of wages, just complete and utter wage theft, where workers will come to us for help because they weren't paid for their last 2 weeks of work or 3 or 4 weeks of work. So that seems to be something that happens a lot in the restaurant world.
And so the common things that you see with back of the house workers is that they're just massively underpaid. So as a good example, I have a client who recently came in. He worked at a pizza restaurant, and he was paid $400 a week for 69 hours of work. And that comes out to about $6 an hour. And that's $6 an hour if you're paid $6 an hour for every hour you work, if you're not getting the overtime premium. If he worked 69 hours, I don't remember exactly what the calculation is, but he should be getting around $630, $640 every single week. So that means every week that this guy was working, he was being underpaid by $200+. And this went on for 6 or 7 months. And so that person is now owed thousands and thousands of dollars by his employer, by this pizza place. And that's a very, very common wage theft problem that happens in the back of the house.
Ya trabajaba yo entre 60, 50, 65. Habían días que sí trabajaba de 65, 70 horas, que me pagaban sobre el tiempo extra, no.
While we as restaurant diners may be disappointed when one of our favorite restaurants abruptly closes, our disappointment cannot match the frustration restaurant workers experience when they find themselves unpaid and unemployed.
I've been a victim, if you will, of wage theft. I know one situation in particular where the boss he locked the doors, He locked the doors and didn't pay anybody their last paycheck.
The last restaurant I worked at, I would say half the paychecks I got bounced when I deposited them into my account. And then that restaurant eventually just shut down out of the blue.
Lo and behold, the boss just disappears off the face of the map, And this is a small city. It's hard to disappear on accident, Like, I never got paid. I should have gotten paid, I think, $450 to this day. I'll never forget that guy.
There were, I think, 2 or 3 paychecks that they still owed me. It probably amounts to a couple grand at least, if not more.
So a couple other things that restaurant owners might do. One is a lot of times restaurant owners will have some sort of unpaid training time when somebody starts working at their restaurant.
Solo fueron domingo, lunes y martes, que no me pagaron esos días porque supuestamente estaba yo conociendo el lugar y cómo trabajaba y cómo funcionaba.
Another one that we see from time to time is a restaurant owner might own multiple restaurants, and each of those restaurants might be owned by a different company. They have a separate corporation set up for each restaurant. And they ask somebody to work at one restaurant for 30, 40 hours so they don't violate the overtime laws, and then they ask them to work at their other restaurant for another 30 or 40 hours so they don't violate the overtime laws.
In a variety of cases we've seen over the years, there have been shaving of hours off of time records where a manager will go back in and take hours off.
Other wage theft things that happen are people are penalized for different things that happen at work, and they have deductions taken from their paycheck. So a lot of times people have to pay for their uniforms or for other things at work. And to the extent that those things take you below the minimum wage, they're definitely illegal.
People can steal your check and move on. This is the reality of our industry.
In Pennsylvania, restaurant workers who have suffered from wage theft have the option to go to the State Department of Labor and Industry or the Federal Department of Labor. Both of these organizations are tasked with investigating claims where workers were not paid correctly or are owed money. Depending on the case, they can also sue an employer and try to recover wages for the workers.
Both of those remedies, the Department of Labor and the Department of Labor and Industry, while it's good that they're out there and it's good that workers have an ability to go to a state agency or a federal agency and get help, aren't always the fastest options to get recovery.
If any of us were pickpocketed while eating at a restaurant, we would know that we could turn to the police. Unfortunately, the people who cook our food or bring it to the table may not be able to rely on the police if their employer steals their wages.
Wage theft is, in my mind, a crime no different from paying somebody and then stealing that money as soon as they walk out of the restaurant. The police don't see it that way.
Another option that is available to restaurant workers is our judicial system. Restaurant workers have successfully filed suit against restaurant owners for unpaid wages.
If you worked for somebody, you need to be paid at least the minimum wage. Actually, in Pennsylvania, you need to be paid your promised wage. And the remedy is to go to court. You can file a lawsuit in small claims court. You can file a lawsuit in the Court of Common Pleas, and depending on where you are, and you can recover those wages.
However, restaurant workers sometimes experience difficulty in collecting their judgments. This diminishes the effectiveness of the judicial system. Fortunately, there are a number of initiatives the state and federal government could take to better protect the rights of restaurant workers.
One The penalties in Pennsylvania are much lower than they are for the federal government. They're much lower than they are in other states.
The penalties are basically under federal minimum wage law, you get to double whatever you're underpaid. The state wage payment and collection law has slightly different penalties, so you get 25% of wages due.
Step two would be getting more people, more government agencies involved. So the Department of Labor and Industry could be more proactive. Right now they're a reactionary agency. They respond to complaints. And they do so because they don't have the funding to be able to go and investigate and just do a sweep of restaurants in Center City.
In some other cities, diners can rest assured that the people cooking and serving them their food are being protected by specific wage theft ordinances designed to ensure that the money left on the table goes into the right pockets.
Austin, Texas has one where they partner with the police, and you can actually be charged with a criminal offense for not paying your workers. San Francisco has a program where they'll try to recover wages, and I believe in San Francisco they can pull the license of a business or not renew the license of a business that's not paying its workers properly. So a restaurant could end up in hot water, not being able to open its doors one day because they haven't been paying their workers.